Battle of Utah Line above Imjin River, Korea. Filipino soldiers stand in isolation. April 22, 1951. Thousands of miles from home, a band of young Filipino soldiers stands frozen in the Utah Line above the Imjin River. The icy wind cuts through their wool coats. The valley below holds the threat of silent enemy fire. They're alone, isolated, yet determined. Their mission: hold the Utah Line when all seems lost. If you love raw, untold stories of courage, subscribe, like, and comment below now. Chapter 1: Arrival on the Utah Line. Our story begins at dawn when the Philippine 10th Battalion Combat Team, PETOK, arrived along the Utah Line above the Imjin River. The battalion left tropical shores and tropical heat to face mountain winds and bitter nights in Korea. On April 22nd, the 10th took over a 3-mile sector of the Utah Line, anchoring a part of the UN front just north of the Imjin. They replaced the U.S. 65th Infantry Regiment and dug into positions beside Route 33, the vital highway between Seoul and Chorwan. Imagine frost-rimmed foxholes, packs heavy with gear, barbed wire glinting in the morning light. The Filipinos knew they stood between the enemy and Seoul, and they felt the burden of that truth. "Stand here, do not let the line fall," their commanding officer said, voice calm but firm. The Utah Line was often overlooked in broader histories of the war, but here the world's eyes were not watching. Here, these soldiers stood in isolation. Snow and wind battered tents and bunkers. The valley below held the glint of distant enemy movement, but the men pressed on. They improved their positions, set up machine gun nests, checked ammo, whispered prayers for home. The night came fast. Cold crept into bones. Yet they held their positions. And as darkness settled over the ridges, they heard the distant crack of small arms fire, a warning that battle would come soon. Chapter 2: Digging in and facing the cold. Early that afternoon, the men of the 10th Battalion Combat Team, PETOK, stood fast atop the Utah Line above the Imjin River. The ground was frozen, the wind fierce. This was no place for the comfortable soldier. Steady, on, they had been told. Tonight, the cold would test that motto. With shovels and bayonets, they carved foxholes into the ridge's rocky flank. Barbed wire snaked along the perimeter. Machine gun nests were mounted on hard dirt and stone. Every man knew that Route 33 thrummed below, the supply line for Seoul, and their duty was to hold it at all costs. Historical records show the 10th took over the Utah Line sector on April 22, 1951, relieving U.S. troops and anchoring one of the most isolated front lines of the war. As dusk fell, the cold deepened. Tropical soldiers from the Philippines pulled their blankets tighter, their breath turning white. They shared stories of home, mango trees, warm summer rains, anything to remember life before the war. Yet around them, the valley boiled with unseen threats. Chinese forces gathered beyond the ridges, artillery shells pummeled ahead, and the silence of night carried the tension of waiting. The isolation was real. On their flanks, Allied units were stretched or retreating. The 10th found themselves facing thousands of enemy troops across the river, exposed under the gray Korean sky. A veteran later recalled, "We were alone, but we were ready." In that heavy cold, they kept awake, wired for action, listening for the first break. Every clank of metal, every distant rumble told them the time was near. They did not know how many would fall, only that the ridge must hold.
Chapter 3. Enemy closes in. Battle begins. In the late hours of April 22nd, the Philippine men of the 10th Battalion Combat Team, PEFTOK, heard the distant thunder of engines and the whisper of winter wind across the Imjin River valley. They knew the enemy was coming. They stood on the Utah line, a 3-mile front they must defend with every ounce of strength. This was more than just cold and isolation, it was confrontation. They had trained for this moment, but nothing from the tropical Philippines could prepare them for the biting Korean air, snow-crusted boots, and the ghostly shapes of Chinese troops moving in the dark beyond Route 33. As moonlight glinted off frost, the first mortar rounds fell. The rattle of small arms fire echoed across the ridge. The Filipinos tightened their positions, scanned the valley, and prepared for contact. According to veteran accounts, on 22-23 April 1951, the 10th BCT were tasked with holding this sector under extreme pressure. One young private huddled behind sandbags, voice trembling. "They're coming." His squad leader nodded, rifle raised, gaze fixed on the shadow-lined tree line below. The enemy, many times their number, advanced. The Filipino soldiers had no illusions. This could be their finest hour or their last stand. Machine gun crews opened fire, tracer lines arcing into black silhouette shapes. Tanks, though few and tired, rolled forward when needed. One surviving account describes how the 10th held the line when others withdrew, and a veteran said simply, "We were alone, but we held." As dawn approached, the ridge burned with action. Enemy charges were met. Fallen comrades were dragged away. Prayers whispered under fire. And in the cold haze of early morning, the Filipino flag still flew. The Utah line did not collapse. Against all odds, they made their stand. Chapter 4. Stand or Fall. Isolation and Heroism. Here they were, on the edge of the Western Front, a Filipino battalion stretched thin, cut off by retreating allies and advancing enemies. The Philippine Expeditionary Force to Korea, PEFTOK 10th Battalion Combat Team, gripped their positions on the Utah line above the Imjin River, the lifeline of Seoul hanging behind them. "Stand here, hold it, no one is coming," someone whispered under his breath. The night was long. Allied units on the flanks fell back, one by one, leaving the Filipino 10th exposed. Records show they defended before and during the Chinese Spring Offensive of April 1951, when Chinese forces struck across the Imjin Route 33 corridor. The flanks in the air meant the men were isolated, no direct support, communication spotty, rescue uncertain. Their only shelter, rock, snow, foxholes carved from ridge terrain. Their only mission, keep the line. And so they did. When the artillery thundered and shells rained, machine gun crews opened fire into the darkness. One survivor said, "We were alone, but we held." A private slipped through the trench carrying a wounded comrade on his back. Someone else lit a flare. The night glowed with tracer flashes and flurries of snow. They fought not for glory, but for the man beside them, and the home they'd left thousands of miles away. The hours dragged on. The cold cut through boots. The hunger gnawed. But the Filipino flag flew on the ridge. When dawn broke on April 23rd, the ridge still stood. The enemy had pressed, attacked, clawed, but the PEFTOK 10th had anchored the line. Their heroism was witnessed, yet seldom shouted. Chapter 5. Reflection and Legacy. If you followed this story of extraordinary courage, please subscribe, like, and comment below. Tell us what this story of Filipino soldiers standing alone meant to you. Months after April 22-23, 1951, the ridge known as the Utah line above the Imjin River settled back into silence, but the echoes of that night live on. The young men of the 10th Battalion Combat Team, the Filipino unit sent to Korea, returned to homes thousands of miles away, changed forever. They bore frozen boots, empty foxholes, the memory of "we were alone and we held." Historical records show the 10th BCT relieved American units at the Utah line and faced the full assault of the Chinese Spring Offensive, targeting the Imjin Route 33 corridor. With left and right flanks falling back, they found themselves isolated, yet their lines did not break. What does that mean today? It means that when the world's attention wandered, someone stood the watch. When the ridge seemed lost, someone held the rope. The fighting Filipinos proved that even when unsupported, courage and duty can forge victory. The legacy of this stand lives in two nations. In South Korea and the Philippines, the soldiers of the Philippine Expeditionary Force to Korea, PEFTOK, are honored alongside other UN allies who fought in the war. Their actions at the Utah line may not yet fill textbooks, but they fill the hearts of veterans and descendants. Today, remembering this moment serves three purposes. First, gratitude to the men who stood while many moved, who held while many left. Second, humility to acknowledge that isolated corners of war matter just as much as headline campaigns. Third, inspiration, because when duty calls and you're alone, you can still stand. If you ever feel alone in your own struggle, holding a difficult job, facing a personal test, defending a cause, remember the ridge at the Imjin River. Imagine the cold wind biting, the valley dark, your friends fallen back, you alone, but still refusing to give ground. That's the heart of this story. And so I ask you, will you bear witness today and tomorrow? Will you honor those who held so freedom could live? Thank you for watching this tale of unsung heroism. Please subscribe, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Which part of these soldiers' story touched you most? Until next time, may we always remember those who stood when no one was looking. Thank you so much for subscribing, liking, and commenting to our video. May God bless us all, always.